I'm Marisol Vega, 29, standing in the frozen food aisle of a Kroger I've never been to before, in a part of town I don't know because my sister-in-law dropped me here. Not offered me a ride, dropped me. Said she needed to run a quick errand and she'd be back in 20 minutes. That was an hour and 40 minutes ago. My phone is at 4% because my husband said I was doom scrolling too much and started charging it in the kitchen at night so I'd stop. I have $11 in cash. My debit card is in a joint account I haven't been able to log into since February. My brother walks through the automatic doors holding a gallon of milk, and he stops dead when he sees me. Marisol. He looks at the cart I've been pretending to fill. He looks at my face. Where's your car? I open my mouth to say the thing I always say. The thing that sounds reasonable, the thing I've practiced until it feels almost true. My husband drives it more, the insurance thing, it just made sense. But I'm so tired. I am so tired of the words that make everything sound fine. His sister has it, I say. She said I make her nervous behind the wheel. My brother sets the milk down on a shelf of frozen peas. He doesn't say anything for a long moment. He just looks at me, and something in the way he's looking at me makes my throat close up because it's the look of someone who finally understands something they should have understood a long time ago. How long have you been standing here? Almost 2 hours. He picks up the milk. Let's go. The inside of my brother's truck smells like sawdust and the pine air freshener he's had clipped to the vent since high school. I forgot how safe that smell felt. I sat with my hands in my lap, watching the Kroger parking lot disappear behind us, and I felt Noah, my daughter, 3 years old, asleep in the car seat he'd already had installed because he'd been driving her to daycare on Tuesdays when I couldn't. I felt her weight and warmth as this anchor keeping me from floating away entirely. My brother didn't ask questions right away. He just drove. That's something people who've never been where I've been don't understand. Sometimes the kindest thing someone can do is just drive. Just move you away from the place you were. After maybe 5 minutes, he said, "Tell me what's actually going on." I looked out the window. It's complicated. Marisol. It doesn't look like what you think it looks like. Tell me what it looks like then. So I told him. And the thing about saying it out loud for the first time, really saying it, not the edited version, not the version where I sound like I have everything under control, is that it comes out in pieces, not in order, not cleanly. It started 2 years ago, right after my daughter was born. My husband's sister, she'd been in our lives before that, in the way family is when you first get married, holidays and birthday dinners and the occasional weekend. Fine. Normal. But after my daughter arrived, she shifted. She said she wanted to help. She said I looked overwhelmed, which I was, because I was 3 weeks postpartum and running on maybe 4 hours of broken sleep. She offered to handle the grocery runs, just until I was back on my feet. I thanked her. Then she started doing the grocery runs her way, which meant buying things I didn't ask for, returning things she thought were too expensive, and once, this is the part that I didn't tell anyone because I knew how it would sound, she threw away a bag of coffee I'd bought because she said the caffeine was affecting my milk supply. And she'd read that somewhere, and she was just trying to help. My husband agreed with her. He said I should be grateful she cared enough to do the research. I stopped buying coffee. I made it at my mom's on the days I visited. That's how it started. One small accommodation, one small surrender, and then another, and then another. Until I looked around one day and realized I was living in a house that felt like a hotel I was a guest in, like I could be checked out at any moment for breaking one of the rules I hadn't been allowed to read. "What rules?" my brother asked. His voice was very steady. The car, The way it happened was my husband said the insurance was getting expensive and it made more sense to keep just one vehicle on the main policy. His was newer. His made sense to keep. I could use it when I needed to, he said. He'd just need to know in advance. A few days, ideally, to plan around it. I thought that was temporary. I thought we'd revisit it. We didn't revisit it. Then his sister started driving me places. To appointments, to my mom's, to the pharmacy. She offered and I accepted, and I told myself it was nice having the company. But after a while, I realized I wasn't being driven where I wanted to go. I was being driven where it was decided I needed to go. And when I mentioned once that I'd like to stop by a friend's house on the way home, she said she had somewhere to be, and she'd bring me another time. And another time never came. The phone thing started small too. My husband noticed I was anxious in the evenings. I was, genuinely. I was struggling, and he said he'd read that social media was bad for postpartum mood. He offered to hold the phone for me after 8 p.m., just to help me wind down. He was so reasonable about it. He framed it like a kindness. And when I wanted it back to call my mom one night, he said she'd just stress me out more. And wasn't I tired and didn't I want to sleep? I started making calls from the parking lot of the pediatrician's office. 15 minutes before his sister came to pick me up. You were calling from parking lots, my brother said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, he took a breath. He let it out slowly. His knuckles weren't white on the steering wheel. My brother isn't a dramatic person, but his jaw was doing the thing it does when he's holding something very tightly inside. Marisol, he said, that's not a marriage, that's a perimeter. I'd never heard it put that way, but that's exactly what it was. A perimeter, and I'd been standing inside it so long I'd stopped noticing where the edges were. I told him the last thing, the thing that had finally broken the pretending wide open. 3 days ago, I asked my husband if I could take the car to see my friend. She'd just had a miscarriage. I wanted to bring her food. It would be 2 hours at most. He said he'd have to check with his sister because she might need it. His sister, for a car I had been the primary driver of before all this started. He said he'd let me know. He never let me know. The next morning, his sister took the car and came back 6 hours later and didn't mention it. When I asked where she'd been, my husband said she'd had a long day and I shouldn't interrogate her. That was when something in me went quiet. Not sad quiet. Decided quiet. My brother pulled the truck over onto the shoulder of the road and put it in park. He turned to look at me fully, the way he does when something is important and he needs me to know he's completely present. We're going back to get your things, he said. My stomach dropped. No, I can't do that today. I need to think about. Not to talk, he said, not to argue. To get your things. You're not going back to that house tonight. I looked at my daughter asleep in the back seat. Her hand was curled next to her face the way it always is when she sleeps. She looked so peaceful. She didn't know any of this. Kids never know until they do. They'll say I'm overreacting, I said. Let them. His sister is she'll make a scene. I know. My husband is going to be Marisol. He looked at me with this steadiness that I'd forgotten existed in the world. I should have asked harder questions 8 months ago, when you stopped coming to Sunday dinners and always had a different reason. When Mom said you seemed different on the phone, I kept telling myself to stay out of it, that you're an adult, that I needed to respect your privacy. He paused. I was wrong. I confused respecting you with abandoning you. I didn't say anything for a minute. Then I said, I need you to know I didn't stay because I was weak. He frowned slightly. I know that. I stayed because I needed a plan. I needed to know I could leave with her and have somewhere to go and have proof of what was happening. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I'd been carrying it for 6 weeks, moving it whenever I changed jackets. sleeping with the jacket on the floor beside the bed where it wouldn't be touched. A folded envelope. Inside, bank statements I'd photographed on my husband's laptop during the 2 hours every week he spent at the gym. Screenshots of text messages between him and his sister about managing my schedule, my access, my visitors. One voicemail saved to a USB drive of my husband telling me, calmly, so calmly that I wasn't allowed to drive anymore because I'd been emotionally unstable, and he was doing this for my own good. I wasn't just surviving, I said. I was building a case. My brother looked at the envelope for a long moment. Okay, he said. He put the truck back in gear. Then let's go use it. The house looked the same way it always did. That was the strange thing. A beige split level on a quiet street with a pretty Japanese maple in the front yard and a welcome mat that said, "Home is where the heart is," which I'd bought at a craft fair 2 years ago before I understood the irony. My brother parked in the driveway. His truck looked enormous and wrong there. They were in the kitchen. I could see them through the side window. My husband and his sister at the island having coffee. They looked relaxed. They looked like people who had just decided something. "Stay close," my brother said. I got my daughter out of the car seat, settled her on my hip. She was awake now, blinking, looking around at the familiar yard. She pointed at the maple. "Red tree," she said. She's been calling it that since October. "Yeah, baby. Red tree." My brother knocked twice and opened the door. I still had a key, technically, though my husband had mentioned once that he thought I'd lost it, and I'd said no, I had it, and he'd said he'd get the locks looked at just in case. My husband looked up first. His expression moved through 3 things in about 1 second: surprise, recovery, and a version of warmth that was entirely constructed. "Hey," he said, standing. "I was just about to call Marisol. You didn't have to drag your brother into. Where is my car title?" I said. His sister set her coffee mug down. "Babe, let's not do this in front of. Where is the title?" My brother stepped in from the doorway. He didn't cross his arms. He didn't do anything aggressive. He just stood there, which was somehow worse for them, I think. My brother is 6'2" and builds houses for a living, and he has this specific quality of stillness that makes it very clear he is in no hurry and will not be moved. "She asked you a question," he said. My husband shifted his weight. "The title is in the house files." "I'm not sure what. And the car itself," I said. "The 2021 Nissan Rogue that's registered in my name?" Silence. My sister-in-law reached for her coffee again. Something in the gesture, the slight performance of casualness, made me look at her directly. "You have 48 hours, I said, to tell me where it is. This is not—" My husband started. "I have the account statements," I said. I took out 1 page from the envelope. Just one. "I have the transfers out of the household account into an account I don't have access to. I have the texts." I held up my phone. I'd taken screenshots before the battery died, saved them to the cloud from the pediatrician's parking lot 3 weeks ago. "I have the voicemail." The kitchen went very quiet. My sister-in-law looked at my husband. He looked at the paper. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. His voice was different now. Smaller. "It's not," I said. "But here's what it can be. It can be something we resolve privately, between us and our attorneys. Or I can make a report today." I looked at my brother, then back at my husband. "My brother knows 3 people at the county sheriff's office." I checked whether withholding a registered vehicle from its owner constitutes theft of property in this state. It does. My sister-in-law stood up. "You're being completely—" "Sit down," my brother said. Quietly. Completely without drama. She sat down. I handed my husband the envelope. "I'm going upstairs to get my daughter's things and some of mine. You won't come upstairs. When I come back down, I'm going to need the spare key to the Rogue and the location of the vehicle. If you don't have that information for me, the next conversation you have about this will be with someone who has a badge." I turned and walked to the stairs. My daughter had her face pressed into my shoulder. I took the steps one at a time. Upstairs, in the room that used to feel like mine, I moved fast. I knew what I was looking for. I made a mental list weeks ago, updated it in my head during the drives to appointments, running through it the way other people run through grocery lists. Her stuffed elephant, both sets of her immunization records from the file in the closet, my social security card and passport from the lockbox, which I had a key to because it was my lockbox, which was something my husband had somehow not accounted for. I grabbed what fit in the bag I tucked under the bathroom sink 6 days ago. The room felt like a stage set, like something that had been built to look like a life but never quite was one. When I came back down, my husband was standing at the island with his hands flat on the counter. His sister was near the back door, not looking at me. He slid a key across the island without a word. "The car is at my sister's friend's house," he said. Apparently, she was borrowing it. He said this like the word apparently made him a bystander in his own life. I picked up the key. Address. He wrote it on a piece of paper. My brother took a photo of it. I looked at my husband for a moment. The last real look, I think. The last one where I was trying to find something worth saving. I didn't find it. That wasn't grief, exactly. It was more like the feeling of finally accepting a forecast you'd been hoping would change. "I'll have my attorney contact you," I said. We walked out. My daughter waved at the red maple as we passed it. My brother's house has a spare room with yellow curtains and a twin bed that folds out to a full. We sat at his kitchen table that night with every document I had spread out between us. He made coffee, real coffee, in a real mug, as much as I wanted. And that's when I started to find the edges of the damage. It had taken me a few weeks to piece it together from the statements I'd photographed. But now with time and space, I could see the full shape of it. The household account, joint, in both names, had been drawn down steadily over the previous 8 months. Not in big withdrawals, in small ones that looked like regular expenses if you didn't add them up. 1,100 here, 600 there. Into an account I couldn't trace from the statements, an account that existed somewhere outside our shared finances. I pulled up my credit monitoring app. I'd signed up for it quietly 2 months ago after reading an article about financial abuse. I'd searched it at the library because I didn't trust searching from the house Wi-Fi anymore. There was a personal loan on my credit report that I did not take out. Opened 8 months ago. $14,000. The address listed was our home address. The signature on the application, I pulled up the documents I'd photographed, looked almost like mine. Almost. The G in my last name was wrong. I've had the same signature since I was 17 years old, and I know every curve of it. I put the phone down on the table. My brother looked at it, then at me. "He opened a loan in your name," he said. $14,000. We sat with that for a minute. "There's more?" I said. I pulled up the account balance from my personal savings account, the one I'd had before I got married, the one I'd contributed to every year from my own income, the one I had been told was mine. Balance, $0. Last transaction, 6 weeks ago. I hadn't touched that account in 4 months. I hadn't touched it because my husband said it was better to consolidate, and I had trusted him, and he had apparently had access because at some point early in our marriage, I had added him as an authorized user for an emergency. He had decided this was an emergency. I don't know how long I sat there looking at the zero. It's strange what your brain does in moments like that. It doesn't panic right away. It just sort of catalogs, like a machine running inventory. This is gone. This is gone. This is all's gone. This is also gone. This is also gone. This is also Gone 22,000 between the loan and the savings, plus however much left the joint account in those transfers. I paused. Plus the car. He nodded slowly. Okay. He got up, refilled his coffee, set a second mug in front of me. I'm calling my attorney in the morning. Tonight, you sleep. I'm not going to be able to sleep, I know, but try. I tried. At some point in the night, my daughter climbed out of the fold-out next to me and pressed herself against my side, the way she does. And I lay there in the yellow curtain dark, listening to her breathe, and I thought about the shape of the last 2 years. The thing people don't understand about slow control is that it never feels like control while it's happening. It feels like help. It feels like concern. It feels like love even, in some distorted version. You don't argue against it because you're not arguing against anything that looks like a threat. You're arguing against someone bringing you coffee the wrong way, or someone wanting to handle the finances because they're better with numbers, or someone saying you seem tired and maybe you shouldn't drive. Each individual thing sounds so small. The problem is none of it is individual. It's a system. It's designed to be a system whether the person running it knows that consciously or not. The boiling water thing, you know the idea. You put something in slowly warming water and it doesn't register the danger until the danger is everywhere. I've been in warming water for 2 years. By the time I realized what was happening, I had no car, no independent access to money, no phone privacy, and a husband who'd convinced me, and almost convinced everyone around me, that this was because I needed help. But here's the thing they don't tell you about that story. The frog has to decide to jump. I decided to jump. I just had to wait until I built enough of a landing. 4 months later, I have a car. It's a 2019 Honda CR-V. Blue, mine. My name only on the title. I have an apartment. It's small. 1 bedroom, which my daughter and I share for now, with a window that looks out onto a courtyard where some retiree has planted tomatoes in huge terracotta pots, and I love it. I love that window. I love that I chose it. The attorney my brother found me was patient and specific. We filed a police report about the fraudulent loan. The handwriting analysis made the forgery clear, and the lender cooperated once law enforcement was involved. The account the money had been transferred to was traced. Some of it has been recovered. Some of it is still being sorted through in civil court. My husband was charged. It took time, and there were weeks when I didn't believe anything would actually happen, but the charges are real, and they are documented, and they have his name on them. I got a job, not a new job. I got my job back. I'd been a dental hygienist before everything, before I'd been talked into taking just a little more time at home, before the maternity leave had somehow stretched into open-ended absence. My old office had an opening. They remembered me. I start next month. My daughter asked me last week why we don't live in the old house anymore. I told her the new place is ours. She thought about that. Then she said, "Do we have a red tree?" We don't. But the woman in 4B has a rose bush that she lets my daughter water on Saturdays. It's not a red maple, but it's something growing, something we get to tend. That feels about right. I used to think that leaving was the hard part. I was wrong. The hard part is the quiet that comes after, the mornings when it's just you and your kid and the coffee you made yourself and the bank account that's yours and the calendar that no one else controls. The hard part is learning to trust that the quiet is safe, that no one is about to walk in and rearrange it. I'm still learning that. Some mornings I check the locks twice. Some mornings I sit with my coffee and I don't check anything at all. Those mornings are getting more common. That's the thing I'm holding on to. The direction of travel. My brother still calls every Sunday. He asks how the apartment is. He asks how my daughter is. He never once says, "I told you so," which is a generosity I don't think I could have managed in his position. Last week he called and I was in the middle of making pancakes and I had the radio on and my daughter was sitting on the counter next to me telling a long and extremely detailed story about something that happened at daycare involving a ladybug and a misunderstanding, and my brother said, "You sound good." I said, "I think I am," and I meant it. That's it. That's the whole story. No dramatic final confrontation. The courtroom stuff is paperwork and dates and attorneys I pay and don't have to charm. No enormous conclusion. Just me and my kid and the apartment I chose and the mornings that keep getting a little easier. If you're listening to this from somewhere in that warming water, if you're telling yourself it's not that bad, if you're making the same accommodations I was making and calling it compromise, if you're doing math in parking lots and hiding phone calls, I need you to hear me. It doesn't have to get worse before you're allowed to leave. You don't have to wait until it's obvious to everyone else. You just have to decide to jump. And if you can, start building the landing before you do. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I read every single one. I used to think the hardest part of my story was the leaving. The moment in that Kroger aisle when I finally stopped lying to my brother. The drive back to that house, my daughter on my hip, my heart somewhere in my throat. Those moments felt enormous when I was living them. But looking back now from the other side, from this small apartment with the yellow curtains and the neighbor's rose bush and the coffee I make exactly the way I want it, I don't think leaving was the hardest part at all. The hardest part was the 2 years before, the slow, quiet work of becoming someone who couldn't trust her own judgment. That didn't happen because I was foolish. It happened because I was tired and I was trusting, and the people around me were patient and strategic in ways I didn't recognize until I was already deep inside it. Every small accommodation I made seemed reasonable on its own. Every time I adjusted, something else shifted just slightly out of reach. That's not bad luck. That's a pattern. And patterns have consequences. What I've come to understand is this. The choices we make in small moments accumulate. My husband's choices to redirect and restrict, made over months, built a situation he eventually couldn't control or explain away. My own choices to stay quiet, yes, but also to pay attention, to document, to wait for the right moment rather than the reactive one, those built something too. They built the folder under the bathroom sink. They built the case that mattered when it counted. There's a kind of intelligence that doesn't show up in any obvious way. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's the intelligence of knowing when to move and when to be still. Of understanding that survival sometimes looks like patience, and patience is not the same thing as weakness. I had to learn to trust that in myself again after 2 years of being told my instincts were broken. That's the work nobody warns you about. Not the logistics of leaving, but the longer project of reclaiming your own mind. And the moral part of it, the ethical weight I sat with in those first months. I thought a lot about what I owed my daughter. Not just practically, in terms of a stable home and a mother who could drive her to appointments and make her pancakes on Saturday. I mean what I owed her as an example. What does she learn about herself from watching me? What does she learn about what she's allowed to expect from the people around her? I couldn't answer those questions well while I was still standing inside that house. I can start to answer them now. I am not a perfect person. I made choices that kept me in that situation longer than I needed to be. I don't say that to blame myself. I say it because I think it's honest, and honesty is the only thing that actually helps. What I can say is that I also made the choice to keep my eyes open, to keep building quietly, and eventually to walk out. Those choices had consequences too. Good ones. My daughter waters a rose bush on Saturdays now and calls it hers. That's enough for me. That's the whole point,